Welcome to the Tridion Sites 10 launch webinar. We'll be getting started shortly, but I'm just going to give people one more minute just to join. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that's tuning in. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Fraser Doig. I'm a product marketing manager here at RWS with a focus on the Tridion suite of products, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. So today I'm joined by our Director of Product Management, Joe Pearman, and Principal Solutions Consultant, Greg Gutman. We're proud to be launching the new Tridion Sites 10, and for the next 45 minutes or so, Joe and Greg will be discussing some of the exciting new features and benefits that you can expect from this launch, as well as some of the key themes and trends that have inspired it. You'll also get to see it in action as Greg walks us through the updated functionality. The session will be recorded, questions are encouraged, and of course there will be a Q&A at the end. We'll also begin the session with a short poll, and we've attached an infographic in the side panel for you to have a look at in your own time. So without further ado, I'd just like to hand over to Joe and Greg, and let's get started.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for taking the time to learn a little bit more about the upcoming Tridion Sites 10 release. We're very excited. From the pre-sale side, I'm like a kid in a toy store. I've just gotten a new release, a new build of the version, and everywhere I turn, there's like new functions, new features. We've really expanded on that whole graphene user interface that we launched with Tridion Sites 9.5, and we've added in a whole lot of extra features. So I'll be doing a demonstration of like some of those pieces, and I'm going to hand it over to Joe, who's going to go through and sort of present the overall context of the release.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, and welcome everybody. So I guess I'm a little bit of a new face in this forum, so I'll just talk a little bit about that. So I'm overall product management director for Tridion, that's Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites. Although I haven't done so much in terms of visible activity on sites, I've been there in the background for quite a while, working on strategy with my colleagues on this and shaping up joint features across the products. It's very nice to have the chance to work in a more of a direct leadership capacity now, and of course to get the chance to present all the wonderful work that the teams have been building over the last over a year now. Just perhaps a couple of things for those of you who do know me through that Tridion Docs context, just to say it's not all about the docs for me. I started this phase of my career actually in HTC, the smartphone manufacturers in Taiwan, now very big in virtual reality, of course. And we were part of global marketing, the global marketing team, and doing some very exciting things in terms of market research, user group research, also some of the technical stuff to do with the corporate website. So I got some good experience with this field there. And since then, when I went into consulting, I got quite into the kind of the technical side of semantic tech. We'll talk a little bit about that later, and the technical SEO that goes with that as well. I also have a personal blog, which I would say is I'm not doing anything like blueprinting or anything like that on it, but it does make me kind of even more in awe of the power of Tridion Sites and what it's doing for our global enterprise customers. So yeah, very happy to be presenting what we've been working on. And be very nice to know a little bit more about you, the audience. And so, Fraser, I think we've got a little poll, haven't we, to bring up?
I've just launched the poll there, so I hope that everyone can see that.
Thanks,
see that
Grace.
some of the results are
Coming
coming
up.
in.
Wow, indeed. So yeah, it's very interesting to know how long you've all been with us.
All right. So an interesting, it's almost a perfect curve. So I see 27%, 0 to 3 years, 44%, 45%, 3 to 10 years, and 30%, 10 plus years. No, actually, it's kind of evening out. Well, actually, the bulk of the people are 3 to 10 years. That sounds great, and that's where I fall into it. I joined SDL 5 years ago, and it's very interesting as we go through some of the demonstration. I'll allude to like some of the amazing things that we've done over the last 5 years, and I think the Sites 10 release is really new and interesting and takes an interesting angle on all the foundational work that we've done in the 9.0 release, the 9.1 release, the 9.5 release, etc. So I think that's very good. All right, so.
Fantastic, thanks, Greg. And of course, for myself, I kind of straddle that. So with Tridion Docs, it's 10 plus as a customer before, and in Sites, of course, I'm in that short term 0 to 3. But that's great. So I think we reflect the whole of that spectrum in some way. Great. So just wanted to give some highlights first of what we've been working on and why. So I think key themes were productivity and accuracy, making it ever easy to use the product, not just in a sense of being nice. I mean, we all like a nice, clean interface, but really helping people work in an accurate and productive way as well. Extensibility is a big thing. We see people more and more using Tridion Sites as really a big platform to do all sorts of exciting things. And so it's important that we make the product as extensible as possible, even down to the core UI, not only integrations, but the way that you can tweak the UI to do what you need. Control and security, I think since the last release, this has only become more prominent. I think there are high profile kind of cases that we see every day in the newspapers about, things with data and so on. So it becomes really, really important to treat everything very securely and give our customers the most control over that. Performance has also been a focus, as ever, I would say, but certainly some big improvements we're seeing. And finally, a theme on guiding visitors to their goals. I'm going to leave that kind of hanging, and we'll get to how that really looks in a little bit. So first of all, on the first one about experience space, getting more done while keeping the overall quality. I think, Greg, you were going to talk about the contrast here with the previous interfaces.
Well, yeah, and I guess this comes back to, when I originally joined SDL, I noticed, the user interface, it took a while to get used to it. It really didn't look that great. And, and I find that for newcomers, looking at the older user interface, people sort of scratch their head. They're like, hey, the world has sort of evolved quite a bit. And when we released the new user interface, I think it just made a whole world of difference. And what's nice about it is as Joe mentioned, it wasn't just about like making things prettier. And Joe, if you could go to the next or build out the slide, it's not just about like making things prettier, but it's actually about addressing some of the functional things that we could do to make the content author experience much better. And you'll notice over here, it's not just about like the extra colors, but it's also about like, hey, you actually get a preview of the item. You don't have to constantly open up the item in order to see what's inside the repository. And we built on this functionality in this Sites 10 release by now allowing you to extend out this user interface. So instead of just clicking to maybe see a preview of what's inside Tridion, you might click on an item to see a preview of what the analytics are or how you do on an accessibility score. There's a lot of really exciting things that we can build. And from a pre-sales perspective, when I'm doing demonstrations to customers, a lot of the times it's about connecting the dots, and sometimes making those connections between different systems, between internal systems and external systems can really provide a whole lot of value to the overall solution. So that's why, you know, I'm just thrilled with what we've got. So Joe will go through and sort of explain all the different areas, and then I'll do a quick demo and we'll get into it.
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I would also mention, because of the way that we've tackled the design here, it's not just saying like, you know, take old screens and put them into a new skin or whatever it is. It really is looking at the jobs that people are doing, and how can we make those jobs ever more effective, and just further reduce the chance that people may make mistakes. I think we heard of a story where a customer previously had accidentally translated too much of the wrong content, and they had to kind of clean it up, and they were commenting to us how much easier it was now with Experience Space, and it would avoid such things happening. So getting a bit more into that kind of workflow, there's a new workflow activities tab to stay on top of things, which really gives you a grand overview of what not just you but your team are doing overall. So this is new functionality, I would say. It's not just this idea of a nicer face on an older functionality, but just the ability to see what your various team members are working on and collaborate much better in that way. Greg, not sure if you've got any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think the collaborative aspect of it is really important, and I think one of the reasons why people weren't able to go to the new user interface so just for those of you who don't know, like when we ship the classic user interface along with the new user interface. But since the classic user interface didn't have all the workflow, it actually was a barrier to adoption. So with Tridion Sites 10, we've removed that barrier, and we have not just like, you know, brought the old workflows system over to or the old workflow interface over to the new user interface as is, but we made a whole lot of functional improvements. And I think that sort of collaborative improvement where you can actually see what people are looking at, you can use some of the overall features of the new user interface where you can do filtered lists, you can select which kind of filters you want and how to filter things out, is incredibly important and should really streamline the whole, you know, approval process.
That's great. So staying still with the kind of the core out-of-box UI, we've improved Experience Space in some various functional areas. For example, the ability to batch upload files, no longer through WebDAV, which is feeling increasingly dated these days. And so we've deprecated that, and now there's a much better way to bulk upload multiple files. Also, just things like thumbnail and list improvements, so you can see content as thumbnails. You can choose what the size of the thumbnails, you know, is it a small or a large thumbnail grid? Just nice things like that to make it ever easier. Options to filter and sort as well. And then a frequent request is on the ability to rearrange columns and even show your own custom data in columns as well. So that is there now. And it's not just a temporary thing. So the next time you would open it, it would go back to what it was. No, you save that view. That's your custom view then, and it saves it, and you can carry on with your preferred way to see things there. So that's the kind of out-of-box UIs. But another thing about being able to move into Experience Space is that our customers use sites in so many different ways, and often it is, as Greg said, it's working with external services, external data. So extensibility is a key thing. So I'm going to go quickly through 3 slides that show us the kind of the highlights of this. And Greg, I know you've got some deeper thoughts on how that can be used later. So first set of things, so in the primary navigation up at the top, you can add buttons, and that might be, for example, a button for a custom dashboard that is also implemented from within Experience Space. And as I just said, you can get your own custom data showing in columns in the Content Explorer as well. You've also got custom action buttons, again, for working with third-party services and data. And also down to custom context menus. I mean, again, this is the theme of productivity. Not everybody uses context menus, but those that do really appreciate them. And so we've got the ability to customize those as well. Then also rich text editor extensibility, and this is really a very open-ended thing where you could use even plugins for the text editor, also you could add or remove buttons, all of these kinds of things. So that's very important to, again, really suit the way that you're working with Tridion Sites and your content. Another thing as well, so previously in terms of extending the old CME, you could add custom fields which were based on URLs. Now it's customizable fields, including a visualization of the data as suits the data. So we got an example here of where it might be a color picker, but I think you can think of many other examples. And I think Greg's got a few up his sleeve that he'll talk about later.
Yeah, well, actually, and I'll talk about, so for example, this is color picker, right? Probably in a Tridion Sites context, you wouldn't use this, but you can imagine, what if you're doing a product launch and then you have to like get product information, you have to look up SKUs, things along those lines. Those are perfect use cases for creating these types of custom fields. And it was interesting. Earlier on today, just a couple hours ago, I was on a call with as part of the technical boot camp, and the developers were going out and saying, well, what are the mechanics behind all of this? And just for those of you who are technically minded in the audience, just so you know that all of these components and all of these extensions, we've created this nice framework that's React based. So, the Tridion user interface is React based, and you'll be able to create these React type components. We've even created very nice utilities, like command line utilities, to sort of build out the scaffolding for all of these custom extensions that you're going to be creating. And then we're also going to be creating a public open source library where you can go and you can grab some of these examples, see how it's done, and then adapt it for your own needs. So this is why I'm getting so excited, right? Because it really opens up a whole new world for making Tridion, the platform that really suits your individual needs.
Thank you, Greg. No, that's great. And it's wonderful to hear your enthusiasm. We had a little practice before this session, didn't we? And
I'm a kid in a toy store.
That's
I'm like,
great,
everywhere I look, I'm like, oh man, here's a Rubik's Cube, here's a model boat, a remote control car. I'm thrilled.
No, it's really fantastic, and looking forward to seeing your demo shortly. Another key theme, as I mentioned, is the security and the control over your content and your information. It's so critical these days. We quite often get questionnaires on how do we handle this stuff, because everybody is getting, their compliance team is really insisting that everything is done properly and by the book. So one of the big deals, one of the popular areas is of course, how do you get access to all this stuff? So how are you authenticated in the system? That's a crucial area. So we've made some improvements to access management, where you can now use access management to authenticate against third-party applications that you use with Tridion Sites as well. So we were talking about custom dashboards, custom sidebars, these kinds of things. So what if you have some of that UI and it's coming from a service where you actually need to log in? So until now, you would have to do that. It would be rather clunky. You'd have to log in once to Sites and once for the external service. And it's not nice for users to keep having to do this. And of course, it can be a security risk if people end up then using an easy password because they don't like doing these things and so on. So you want to really minimize that. You want to have a true kind of single sign-on experience. And that's what we've now enabled with access management. So you can register your custom applications and make them work with access management as well. And so you have full control over who can access this and which specific actions are allowed as well. And we've also improved the control over publishing and add-ons. So these might seem like details unless you have been kind of involved in them. For the customers that need them, they're really important. In terms of maintaining an audit trail, basically, on who has access to do which things. Now, one of the things is when your controls, your permissions in the system aren't very granular, you might end up in a situation where you have to grant too many people an admin access right. And that in itself is a risk, of course, because an admin can do all sorts of things that you might not really want all those people to do. So one example is managing the lock on checked in or checked out items, where you can say, like, that's a kind of only a medium risk, to be honest. you might want a group of people to be able to do that can't do some of the more drastic actions that a full admin can do. And so we've now built that more granular permission, so we can delegate that right without making somebody a full admin as well. And another thing in terms of, again, working with third-party services and add-ons, when you're giving people the rights to do that, you also want to often keep tabs on what are they doing with that. Just check that everything is kind of above board and make sure that the system is set up properly to work with those add-ons. So we're now storing auditing data if you need to see when an add-on is added or when it's updated as well. So more improvement over publishing and add-ons there. And I just wanted to mention, like, all of these things, they're all based very much on customer requests and demands. I mean, we have to obviously synthesize them into themes. We have to think about the architectural work. But when it comes down to it, it's all driven by yourselves through forums such as our community ideas here.
Yeah, and certainly, like, if you guys have like more ideas, keep them coming on the community, because we really take those ideas seriously. And oftentimes, like, the things that you might be requesting aligns perfectly with somebody else and what they're trying to request. So it's a really powerful tool. We're also going to be putting up more materials on the community on a more consistent basis as well, including, you know, sort of pointers to some of the new examples that we're going to be putting up for the extensions. So I think you know, if you have any ideas like after this session or any thoughts, please do post them on the community or on the Stack Exchange discussion groups.
That's great. So that's an overview in terms of Content Manager itself, and I think it's a good time now, Greg, if we can have a look at it live.
All right, well, let's take a look. I'm going to share my screen over here. Let's see.
We're just doing some juggling of controls and buttons here.
There we go. Show my screen. Perfect. All right. I guess everybody should be able to see my screen, right? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to go down. So and just I'm going to start with workflow, and then I'm just going to roll into to different items. So you can see here already, you know, this user interface has been customized with some of the extensions that we have, but I wanted to go ahead and start everything with just the workflow. So let's go into one of the items over here. So this is a component. It's a press release. For those of you who know how to who've used the new user interface, this will all be familiar. So let me just say, now we've got 7 different ways in 2023. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish. And what this is going to do is this is going to now allow me to just kick off a workflow process immediately from here without leaving the user interface. And I'm going to go take a look. And this is something where it's a couple step process for this workflow. So I've made some changes. A workflow has been kicked off. For those of you, by the way, who haven't started to use the new user interface, this little arrow over here is your best friend, because that allows you to quickly like bounce back to where you were. So it's a nice way of being able to sort of traverse a tree. If I go here, you'll notice that on the activities menu, we've got a really nice inobtrusive way of giving you notifications that something new has happened. So you can go now and you can see, all right, this is the new task that I have. You can see basically information about this individual item. You can see some additional task information. If I want to, I can also use some of the filtering to show, okay, show me all the items just for myself, or I can show activities for all users. So if I do all users, I can then further filter things down into just seeing like a particular user. So we give you like overall control over what you want to see, and then we can allow you to create specific filtering, and then you can even control like what are the filters that you're going to be able to select. So there's multiple levels of control that you can have in terms of defining what would be the most efficient workspace for yourself. So here's that item that I just created. I can go into this item, I can review it, I can take a look at the process history of this item, and you can see, you know, all the different steps that have gone through, that it has gone through. I can even go ahead and do things like, okay, I can start this activity. Now it's moved into another stage. You'll notice over here that you're also able to see in both text and in colors, you know, what things are happening on what stage. And I think that there were some of our customers were asking for these types of like stoplights, like easy visual ways to manage, you know, multiple hundreds of workflow items that are happening all the time. And that's another thing that you'll see when you start to work with the Tridion interface, is that it was really built to work with like large problem sets. And so you'll notice that as you're working with it, you won't get these big page refreshes, but there'll be individual items that are going to refresh behind the scenes. Now, one thing I'll do is, let me go into the content area, and I'm going to show you an illustration of how things just work behind the scenes, and then you get notified with the bulk uploading. So if I go into the content area over here, I guess I'll just go into, let me just go into this area, into a little content area, so I can go into this image directory. We don't have anything in here. What I'll do is I'll simply upload a multimedia component, and then over here, what's nice is you notice that you're able to simply select multiple items. You can then do that uploading, and by the way, so from here, while these things are uploading, you can move on to other places in the website, and then we'll be getting a notification once all of the items have actually been uploaded. So I didn't do anything there, just, you know, it's sort of refreshed behind the scenes, which is really nice. As Joe mentioned, we've got these nice ways to, you know, easily go into like visual modes. You can see once again here, these are the different ways that you can, you know, apply some filters based off of schema, and a lot of the things that people used to do in the advanced search in the old classic user interface, you're able to do that very easily, very naturally over here through this user interface. So this is the bulk uploading. I want to quickly jump into another feature, which is those custom fields that we have. So let me go into a basic article over here. All right, whoops, let me see. So let me go into this article. And when I go into this article, you'll notice a couple of things. So on the one hand, this is this custom control. So these are controls that, you know, we're going to be putting out as examples, and I'm sure there's some very useful types of controls that you might want to do. Maybe things where you've got like multiple sliders, one affects the other, etc. So you'll be able to do that and embed those into your components for your content editors to use. I also wanted to highlight the fact that we also, since 9.5, we've had the TinyMCE editor. One thing that we're doing as part of the 10 release is that you're going to be able to put plugins into the TinyMCE editor. And for those of you who know TinyMCE, there are a whole lot of plugins that are available on their website, either as free plugins or as premium paid plugins, but you'll be able to sort of either use plugins that have already been defined, or you'll be able to create your own plugin. So if there's anything that you want to do in those rich text fields and where you want to adapt TinyMCE, you'll be able to do it with the same extension framework that we use to make modifications to the overall form editor. So that's a really powerful thing that we have. Now, with these fields, I also wanted to quickly talk about, well, what does that deployment look like? So everything gets packaged up as these different add-ons. So we're using this add-on framework where you upload a zip file, and then you also have a definition of what these add-ons do. And I think the most important takeaway from this is everything all these add-ons are sort of cloud friendly. So if you guys are already on RWS Cloud, or if you're moving to RWS Cloud, this add-on framework will allow you to really manage those configurations in the cloud through this nice user interface. And that's something that I think is super important as well. When I talk about the things that are really important, we also have now opened up the access management. So access management, once again, it's a cloud-friendly module of Tridion, and it dovetails in really nicely with all of these extensions that you can create. And the idea is that some of those extensions might need some authentication, and as Joe mentioned, if we give you the ability to manage the tokens and the access through a unified interface, it'll make the overall solution much easier to control. And once again, this is also cloud friendly. Going back to the main article over here, and I'll just let me just revert back. I just also wanted to illustrate, what some of these extensions could look like. So one of the things that we're going to do is I'm just going to show you this navigation at the very top. That is something that has been changed through an extension. So for example, here I've got a navigation that's only going to be available to an administrator. You've got things where you can get sort of other objects within the system, like the users, and you'll be able to list them out. If we go back to the content list and go into some of the content items, you'll also be able to see how when you go through. Let's go just maybe into the products over here. You'll see that you'll also be able to add items like across the top here. So for example, this one is an illustration of, okay, how can you have like, some pop-ups which may or may not request additional information and so on to go through the user interface. You've got other ones to, that we have to like switch some of the user context information. So, how can you have the user interface switch to Dutch, or I guess if you turn your head, switch to French. Just a little joke. The main idea is that you'll be able to make these types of modifications. You'll also be able to do things where there'll be a right click, and you'll be able to add additional items, to that right-click contextual menu, and you can see how you're really going to be able to create these little React components that tie into the overall Tridion content management React application. So there's like superpower that we're offering, and this is one of the things that I'm just getting so excited about, because we have a couple of quick little examples here, but you can imagine, that whole ecosystem of, okay, how do I do a product launch? I got to like look up information from, a PIM system. I got to go ahead, I got to create some content, and maybe I have to have some sort of process for like doing an SEO review, maybe an accessibility review. Maybe then after the launch, I want to be able to have some information about what are the analytics for the piece of content. So it's a really, it really opens up the door, I think, to expand what we have into like a much wider ecosystem. And for me, I think that is really where, we are going to be able to address like more and more complex problems, and really distinguish ourselves from the sweet and simple little CMSs, and really expand on the power of Tridion. So that was all the items that I wanted to show. I'm gonna flip back to Joe, and we're gonna go through some more slides about all the other things that are coming up in the release. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to stop showing screen, and let me send this back to Joe. Here we go.
Thank you, Greg. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And once again, like I'm just a very enthusiastic person generally, and this release makes me extremely happy.
No, that's great. It's great. I love the way you can bring all these features to life. It's like we feel the potential, and then it's like you're really taking it, to the places it can go. So that's great. So hopefully my slide is showing up now. Wanted to go a little bit into the delivery side of things, where we've got two key improvements here. And first one is on caching. So it's a little bit of a hidden one, I would say, but it is still a very solid and secure kind of improvement to our infrastructure here. So this is not my kind of specialty here, but basically caching layer has been completely rewritten, and this improves, on one side, it can improve performance. On the other side of that, it also reduces system usage. Of course, it lightens the load and helps things in that way. And this is both if you have client-side caching, which you really should do, or if you happen to not have any client-side caching, it can still help things. And one scenario that was presented to me, which I was quite impressed with, I hope I get this right, it would be to say, let's say you get the same query into DXD, our dynamic, just to qualify this, so this is our headless delivery platform, of course, dynamic experience delivery we're talking about. And let's say that it gets the same query basically from 100 different users in quick succession, so quick that initially it hasn't even cached that in your client-side caching. We're now much smarter about the way we hand off. So we're providing it once, and then we're making sure we hand back to the client-side caching in good time, so that all works smoothly together. So it's not, hopefully this isn't necessarily something that you go, oh, wow, you notice the difference, except in terms of overall performance and it being very much more predictable for your visitors at the end of the day. So good improvements there. Next one is something a bit more kind of futuristic, I would say. And Greg, perhaps you could start to set the context on this one.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So for those of you who are using Tridion Sites experience optimization, how it can be used to set up particular types of rules, based off of maybe a user profile, maybe based off of somebody's behavior on the website. And the thing about this is the experience optimization is I think a very important module for the customers who are using it, but it's something where it requires you to sort of set up the rules, and those are like if then, if this condition, then show this, and that's the way it works. And I think that for large websites has absolutely its place. But now what we want to do is we want to add on something so that you're now going to be able to use like knowledge graphs and taxonomies to help with that process. So if you go to the next slide, or build out this one. So when we introduced Tridion 9.6 with the semantic AI module, gives you the ability, it's really nice. It gives you the ability to say, hey, suggest some tags, and we use our semantic AI integration to sort of populate, how should this content be categorized? And importantly, it causes us to really sort of rethink the way that we're approaching content, because content isn't always about like an explicit thing. Here's a page, I want to put some content on it. Oftentimes you'll have like content that just might be categorized. You don't know necessarily at what point it's going to be useful. It might appear like on the list of like, show me the latest types of articles for this technology line, things along those lines. But now what we're finding is that we want to be able to give people, semantic based recommendations. So if you're on a particular piece of content, you will be able to see sort of other relevant content that sort of maps up to the original piece of content on the knowledge graph. And so that means that as a content author, like if you just tag things well and your system is enabled with these content recommendations, you'll be able to see, you know, relevant stuff that bubbles up. And Joe's got a really interesting and great use case that I love. And, you know, certainly if there's any airline customers on here, you'll be able to relate to it. The value is really that content can just be tagged in a particular way. You don't have to create the rules, and then it can bubble up as a recommendation.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I think from the product side, we often tend to get a bit techie about this stuff. So here you've got a visualization of concept tags against a piece of content, which is great. And sometimes you see those concept tags presented kind of hierarchically as a tree, kind of more traditional taxonomy view. Sometimes for variety, you see like a bunch of connected bubbles. It tends to stay there at the kind of conceptual level, and it's really good to see a practical example. So just one from my own experience. So my wife is from Taiwan. My elder daughter was born in Taiwan, and we often travel back there to see the in-laws. And we had our daughters quite close together, and it's what everybody says, like later on, as they get older, that's great because they play together and everything. When they are very young, it's a bit of a nightmare, particularly on like a 16-hour flight to Taiwan. So you got it was, I think, one time they're 2 and 4 years old respectively, so it's quite a handful really on that long flight. So I had been looking up some information for the upcoming flights for that summer. It was the rules of carriage for an infant. I think Elizabeth still qualified as an infant back then. I was looking it up. I got the information I needed from the airline's website. I went ahead and bought the ticket. We went ahead and had our somewhat painful long journey to Taiwan, had a great holiday, had a somewhat painful journey back again, as usual. And all that was fine. It's kind of what I expected. But there was an opportunity missed here because a couple of months after we came back, I found that the airline was actually offering this this thing called a family couch. Now it's still in the back of the plane, you know. But it's the ability to have a special mattress that covers three seats and makes a kind of a bench bed. And it's really great when you're traveling with kids because they can actually get some proper sleep, have a good rest, and you will feel so much better at the end of that 16 hours. So that's great, or it would have been, because I didn't know about this when I bought my ticket, when I was looking up the rules. And I was just thinking, like, here am I looking for information about carrying an infant on a plane. Wouldn't it have been a good idea to suggest this family couch to me? I would have gone for it. I'd have been buying it straight away. And yet you have this feeling of kind of disconnected information. You can almost visualize that the content is coming from different groups of the company, the legal team versus the the marketing team or something like that, and it wasn't connected. And you might say, okay, so how do we use technology to connect those experiences and link these things and suggest the family couch? One thing, of course, you could just put a hyperlink or something, or a manually added preview onto the rules of carriage page. And that's okay, but it kind of works once. If you change the target you're pointing to, of course, you've got to remember to update your link. What if you wanted to do it for more than one type of thing? You know, what if there are all sorts of different journeys where you want to recommend different offers? It's just not going to scale. So you really want to avoid doing it manually. Now, of course, the rules-based approach that Greg talked through, this can be very good when you're doing specific campaigns. You have a very specific kind of context or environment in mind, and that's great. But again, it doesn't really scale to multiple cases wherever you want people to, coming from different geographies with different needs. Is it infants? Is it older people? Is it a business trip? All these things where you might have relevant offers. And again, it's going to be harder to maintain very exact rules for all of these. And here's where the knowledge graph approach can come in to help. So we've got this page about infants, traveling with infants, the infant rules. And the first thing I'm going to do is match it to the part of the knowledge graph that says visitor intent. So I have a whole kind of group of different kinds of visitor intents. And my intent right now, travel with infant. And so that's what I've connected to this page in the knowledge graph. So the page knows now that it's about traveling with an infant. And then the page also knows that it's relevant to certain types of trip. it's certainly relevant to long haul trips, may or may not be relevant to short haul trips as well. So this is another thing that I would tag up that page with. And then perhaps geography is relevant as well. Depends, of course, how you organize your publications and everything, but it could well be that this is another facet, another part of your knowledge graph, another dimension where depending on the region you're starting with, there might be different rules applying. And so we're going to have this starting region here. It actually said originally UK on the starting region. I'm not seeing that, but take it as read that the starting region was the UK indeed, because that's where I'm coming from. So now we've got this page tagged up with its relevant information in the knowledge graph. So what can we do with this then? How do we make this connection to this other page, the family couch that I could have bought and an opportunity was missed? Well, simply to say that the family couch also matches all those criteria there. It matches traveling with an infant. It's still for long haul, of course. You're not going to bother with it for short haul. And it's still related to traveling from the UK. It still works for that. And so by virtue of these things being relevant to both pages, it's a very sensible thing to say, well, I should recommend the family couch automatically when I'm on the infant rules page. And so no special extra rules have to be done, just have a rule that says match these things up, preview the one from the other, and that can all be automated. And you can imagine a whole family of different types of offers based on different intents and geographies and so on. So that's one case. What if you have a case when you're not getting many recommendations and you want to kind of broaden this a little bit? You might say, well, it's not only about traveling with infants, but it's also about traveling with kids overall. And of course, this is the way that knowledge models work. They have this idea of more specific information and slightly broader information. So of course, it knows that infant rules, because it's traveling with an infant, it's also about traveling with kids overall. And it's quite possible that if you have an infant, you have an older kid with you as well. So what else might you recommend based on that? Well, you might have kids games, which doesn't match for the infants, hopefully, but it does match the traveling with kids. And you might also want to recommend some information about the kids games. And again, perhaps there are some paid offers you could go for, or at least you're happier with your visit to this site and your overall trip. So this certainly improves your relationship with that brand. So those are some of the things you could do on an automated basis from a knowledge graph. I'd like to add, this is not all kind of pre-programmed kind of heavyweight static taxonomies. The way we've done it, you can layer on the types of information that you need. For example, if you have data from a customer data platform, perhaps it's about the customer's frequent flyer status in this case. Then again, of course, if you're kind of a premium frequent flyer, then there might be other offers applying to you, and you could also automate the recommendation of that content. So it's really about getting visitors to their goals and wherever possible going over and above that. Greg, any quick thoughts on that as well?
No. I think, I was just going through some of the chat, questions, and there was a question about, what about some of the search improvements, and I think this all ties into to search. And I think I've always said it. If you go to a lot of people's on-site search as well, oftentimes it's not as functional as you'd want it to be. So if you think about Tridion 9.6 give you the idea to not only have keyword searches but also have these conceptual searches, I think that this recommendation feature can also be used to assist in fixing up search and having the recommendations of additional content, which will, I think, bring in a whole new dimension to making search, relevant and responsive to what people need. Now, mind you, search is tough. It's tough because you gotta nail it from like a usability standpoint, from what the UI looks like. You gotta nail it from like how your content is organized, etc. But I think we're giving people more tools in their toolbox to address that problem. And I'd be happy to go through some search scenarios for people. If anybody on the phone really wants to tackle the search problem, make their search better, let me know, and we can go through how we could use recommendations, how we could use semantic AI to make that experience better for your site visitors.
Yeah, thanks for bringing in that question, Greg. And of course, this is part of the semantic AI package, which we already did kind of faceted search, smart searches to recommend concepts, not just based on keywords, but based on the type of thing you're looking for and so on. So that does all improve search. I think there's also the other point that search isn't always the answer. I think a lot of people here will know that term pogoing, where what you don't really want to see in terms of visitor behavior is they keep bouncing back up to the search, because often that's some kind of frustration and not reaching the goal. So another way of looking at this recommendations is to almost say to avoid the need to keep bouncing back up to search. We're saying you've got somewhere on your journey and we're helping you go further in that same journey without necessarily having to literally type in queries that way. Great. So just to sum up, this is the AI targeted recommendations powered by our semantic AI package. And it's got a lot of control way beyond what I described, as you can imagine. It's worth mentioning, we've just recorded a bootcamp kind of detailed series of training sessions on how to implement and get the most out of Tridion Sites 10. We will be posting those videos on the community shortly. So a really good resource to get more information about how all this works and how to put it into practice. So I think in terms of slides, it just remains to talk about quick next steps. I will flash up the slide briefly on platform support. I don't intend to go through all these. This information, again, it's all in that bootcamp recording, and it will all be in the documentation released shortly. But just here, if anyone wants to take a quick screenshot, that's fine as well, of course. And then in terms of actually upgrading, we support still, of course, the 2 upgrade paths for Tridion Sites. We have the more kind of the clean slate type one, where it's the staged upgrade if you really want to almost start from scratch, and that you can upgrade from 9.1, 9.5, and 9.6 with that approach. And of course, this is the most kind of belt and braces way to do it. But of course, we do still offer the rolling upgrade as well to upgrade the database and to almost do a hot swap, I would say. So in kind of simpler kind of scenarios, this is a really good option. It means 0 downtime for the users. You can just keep working as normal, and you will minimize your disruption there. And again, of course, more information on this during the bootcamp. And in terms of like really practical next steps, recommend, hopefully you like what you've seen. Looking forward to taking a few more questions on this. And please do contact your account manager to discuss upgrading and what to do next. So thanks very much. Appreciate you joining the session with Greg and me. And I'm interested if we've got some more questions.
Yes,
so Greg gets the power tools to see the questions. I don't see the questions.
Yeah, myself and Greg, we've been going through the questions. There's a lot of good ones coming in. If you'd like, I'll read some of them out, and put it to the both of you, and you can choose between the two of you who answers it. Mm-hmm. So we have one here. Can Tridion Sites be integrated with any analytics solution available in the market?
Short answer is yes. Very much so. Yes, absolutely, it can. Yeah, no problem.
Great. A lot of these questions have been answered in the chat, but in case they're relevant to the rest of the audience here, I will read out some of the more interesting ones. Mm-hmm. So we have a question here from Vanessa around exporting, and Greg, I see that you've answered that one privately, but
did I answer privately? I'm sorry.
Yes, sure.
One thing, and this goes to like, there's all these like amazing little things that I'm discovering in the UI. So one thing that's really nice is that you'll be able to like use those filters to like filter down the set, and then you can just press the export button, and then you'll be able to export those results into a spreadsheet and do whatever else you want. So there's really nice ways for us to allow you to do, to sort of move some of these data sets or filter and then move some of these data sets around. And it's so funny. It's like when you find these little things in the UI, it's like, oh yeah, like of course that makes complete sense. I'm so happy they put it in. So that was.
So just for the context, Greg, this is from lists in Experience Space, right?
Yeah, exactly. So any list, you can just export it. I mean, because before, believe it or not, I heard of like customers who would would sort of like copy, then they'd put it into like a text pad, and then they'd have to like fix it up. And it's I don't know, it's much smoother right now. It really performs the way that you'd expect a modern application to perform, and that's really what I love about it. And I just can't wait to see all of the really interesting things that we're going to be able to develop both internally and through our partners and in the field around the extensions and how to use them. And by the way, if there's any technical questions about the extensions, like earlier on this morning, I saw a really great presentation around the whole architecture of the extensions, and the fact that you'll be building React components that tie into that content management React application that we have. We've exposed a whole lot of different objects, so you'll be able to take different items and pass either a single TCM ID or like a set of TCM IDs into another into a React component. It can do some processing, come back, show results. And so I was very impressed. I mean, not that I totally understood everything that the developer was showing, but it really looked nice. And I think that there's also some great things that we've done as well in terms of just getting started, because oftentimes when you trying to learn a new framework, etc., it can be a bit clunky to say, okay, like how do I actually build one of these things? And so we've set things up for development environments so that you could use a command line. It builds at the scaffold. We also have a system where we can set up like a proxy between your Tridion environment and your local environment to do some of the testing without interfering with anything that might be going on a development server. The whole idea is that you'll be able to develop these add-ons pretty much fully before you have to move them over and test them like in on a full development server. So we've made some interesting choices just in terms of how to set up and scaffold those types of solutions.
That's great. And just to mention, this presentation you were talking about, Greg, this is part of the bootcamp that will be posted on the community as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of questions while I was talking. Let me go ahead and see if I can address some of them. So, will Fonto be the next WYSIWYG editor for Tridion? I know that in the field we're working through some examples and some prototypes. So right now, I think it's probably going to be something that is going to exist as an application of the technology. So right now, the prototype that I've heard is using the REST API to connect to the Tridion Sites API to do some editing of content. So we'll see how that comes along. It's a really nice application of the solution, and there's no reason not to use Fonto or another or any other product that can use the REST API if you want to give your content authors a different type of experience. I don't think we'll probably roll it into the main line of the product quite yet, but I know there's sort of a field solution that is in the process of being developed.
Just to say, I concur, of course. Yeah, indeed, it's a great option to have there, but we also see many customers getting a lot of value out of the rich text editor, and of course, we've just made it extensible so that people can continue to do that. So that's very much still a focus as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a and I think as well, like there's some additional things with Fonto. There's a whole richness that's in there that can be used can be used to sort of work with an infrastructure that you already might have in-house, because it's a pretty wide user interface. So if you have, for example, some collaboration tools that you want to work into Fonto, I think it's more sort of in the solution category versus like the R&D one. So let's see. So was analytics functionality included with Content Manager in V10? So for public analytics, we suggest people just to use Google Analytics or any other analytics providers. We're gonna come out with some more information about how to effectively use analytics tools with Tridion, like what are some of the steps, best practices, etc. And so that's analytics on the site visitor side of things. If you're talking about analytics on the content, like, hey, go and sort of analyze all the content that I have and produce some things. There's actually a partner solution by Content Bloom that goes, they've got a practice around, you know, reporting and creating these data lakes for you to create some reports. So if that's a specific issue, like, talk to your account representative, because we'd be happy to present that solution to you. So once again, that's sort of a solution-based thing that is available.
Probably worth just quickly mentioning on that theme. Yeah, as you mentioned, Google Analytics or something like that is very great for the usage, the visitor side of things, and we have other approaches for the kind of more CM data. Of course, some of the best things happen when you actually join that up together to say, what are the pages that you've invested effort in, the components and so on that you've spent time in developing, and nobody's actually reading them. Nobody's coming to see them. Why might that be? Is that because they're not quite as good as you thought they were, or because their metadata is not matching up, or is it some other reason? And so it's very good to match this up all the way from content creation through management to actually who's visiting and how much do they like it. And this is an area we are looking into. How can we accelerate this and get this full picture, I think, clearer for our customers.
Greg and Joe, we are at the top of the hour now.
All right.
So let's. Well, I'm going to wrap up the questions. If your question wasn't answered, then I will download the questions here. Joe or Greg can respond to you individually with an answer to your question.
Yeah, totally.
So thank you both to Greg and Joe. This was a really informative and interesting session. I'm sure that everyone that's in attendance here has taken something useful from it and gained an insight into what makes Tridion Sites 10 so exciting to our community. So all that's left is to say thank you to everyone that's attended. You'll all receive the webinar recording shortly. If there are any other follow-up questions or you'd like to talk about upgrading, please do speak to your account manager. Yep. So once again, thank you for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.